This is Rob Vanhoff coming again with Parashat Shemot. Like we did last week, we finished the book of Genesis and looked at ancient manuscripts, particularly the Washington Pentateuch, which is housed at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. It's just over 1,000 years old, beautiful manuscript. That's what you're looking at right now. And we're looking at part of Exodus 3. And so I'm just going to look at a couple verses from Exodus 3 from this 1,000-year-old codex, as well as our friend, like we like to do, from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, this is from a different scribe than we looked at last week, but it's also roughly 2,000 years old. It's from the same cave, Cave 4 at Qumran, which is, if you ever visit Qumran, Cave 4 is actually visible. You're able to walk. You don't have to hike very far at all. It's just a really short walk, and you can see Cave 4. It's pretty amazing to see it and to stand there and think, wow, just over, 70 years ago, it was full of manuscripts and nobody knew it. But anyway, thankfully, we know it now. And so this was from Cave 4. And this is a obviously highly fragmentary section of Exodus. And we're going to be looking at this section up here in the upper left to zero in on Exodus 3, starting with verse 11. And what I want to do is we're going to compare and contrast, like we did last week, the Washington Pentateuch with the Dead Sea Scrolls. And I just have a few little rabbit trails that I want to take you on. One will pertain to a Masorah note, and we'll kind of take a moment to look at the Aleppo Codex, which is probably a little earlier than the Washington Pentateuch. And we will also look at some rare forms that are shared both in the medieval manuscripts that we look at, like this Washington Pentateuch, as well as this fragment from the Dead Sea Scrolls. So let's get started here. Oh, I have one other treat too, and I'll show you what that is. I've found a way to hook up my little iPad so that I have a picture here that I took, a snapshot from the Dead Sea Scroll screen, and I'm going to be able to write on this. If I can, so I can write like shalom. I can write and annotate things. Like, for example, I'll just show you off the bat. Here's our famous Ehya Asher Ehya. Now, of course, there's it's broken here, so I can write in the Aleph and the Hey. Ehya Asher Ehya. So we're going to get there during our little session here tonight. I'll erase my little shalom. And what we're going to do is start, though, up at the top here. We're going to start right at this location here. So I got to put my eraser on right here. And of course, with Hebrew, what direction do we read? We start at the right and we go this way, right? Oops, I don't want that. There we go. Okay, so there's a bit of a learning curve for me here. Bear with me. But I'm enjoying this, and I want to be able to share stuff that I think is cool, and I hope that you will think it's cool as well. So what we're going to do here is zero in on Exodus 3:11. So again, this is from the Washington Pentateuch and Exodus 3:11. So our Torah portion is called Parashat Ve'ele Shemot. These are the names. And hopefully you're familiar with the book of Exodus. I'm going to presume you are. And here we are. So we're zoomed in here at a high-res picture of the Washington Pentateuch. And it's a really cool, very beautifully written, as you can see, according to the Masoretic tradition. So not only the shapes of the letters and the artistry behind the calligraphy, but we have all these little dots and scribbles around the text, which indicate for us vocalization and accentuation. So right here with these two little dashes here, one other cool thing is I figured out how to make my cursor a little bigger so it's easier for you to follow. These two little dashes is the end of a verse. So it's a sof pasuk, Mitzrayim. We're going to stop there. And then verse 11 starts with this vav here. Vayomer Moshe el ha-Elohim. And Moses said to Elohim. So Moses said to God. And we're going to scroll up. Mi anochi ki elech el paro. Mi anochi ki elech el paro. Who am I that I will go, elech, that I would go to Pharaoh? So this elech here is what we would call an imperfect. And what that means is that it is kind of a future sense of a possibility. Who am I that I will go to Pharaoh? Because remember, God already told him he's going to do this. He says, V'chi otzi et b'nei Yisrael mi-Mitzrayim. And that otzi, another first person singular in the imperfect, because we had elech, I will go, or who am I that I would go, or ki v'chi otzi, or that I would cause the sons of Israel to come out of Egypt, that I would bring them up. Otzi, this is the same where we get motzi. Hamotzi. So hamotzi, for example, there's a prayer, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. And when we talk about the lechem, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Hamotzi is the one who brings up lechem min haaretz. So the verb lechotzi comes with the verb or the preposition min, mem, meaning from. So otzi et bnei Israel, who that I will bring the children of Israel out of Egypt. So when we say the blessing hamotzi lechem min haaretz, it's the same verbal structure of what Moshe is saying, that I would bring Israel instead of bread out of Egypt instead of out of the land. So that is Exodus 3, verse 11. And what I want to do here is look at a Masorah note, just to give you an idea of a Masorah note. Notice here, mi anochi, and there's a little circle. See that little guy? That tells the reader to look in the margin. And in the margin, we see a gimel with 3 little dots. And that just means 3 times. Mi anochi. So, and notice how the circle is between 2 words. So it's not above the word mi. It's not above the word anochi. If it was, it would just refer to that alone. But when it's in between the 2 words, it means the phrase mi anochi. And what this tells us is that mi anochi occurs 3 times. And if often, but not always, we would look at the Masorah Gedolah. We would look down in the margin. And sure enough, it says, Mi anochi, who am I? 3 times. That's the gimel. V'siman hon, which means end their verses or their catchphrases. And it says, and it has this phrase here, Ki elech el paro. So that's Ki elech el paro. That's what we just read. That's our Exodus 3. But then it says, Umi chayai mishpachat avi. That is from 1 Samuel 18. That's where Saul tells David that he's going to give him his daughter, Merav, and David says, who am I that I would be son-in-law to the king? And so there's a mi anochi in that verse in 1 Samuel 18. We're going to look at that in Aleppo Codex. And then at the last one it says, Umi beiti, and who is my house? And that's also David. That's from 2 Samuel 7, when he says, who am I that the Lord would choose me? We'll look at that one also. So basically what the Masorah note is saying here is that there are 3 times when we have mi anochi in all of Scripture, in all of Tanakh. So the concept now is that there's a canon, right? There's a canon. It's a fixed body of texts. There's only 3 mi anochis. There's one in Exodus, and it's Moshe speaking to God. And the other 2 are David. One is from 1 Samuel, David saying it to Saul, Shaul, mi anochi, and the third one, the other one in Samuel is 2 Samuel, also David, this time David as king, and he's saying to God, who am I? So I wanted to show you guys that one. And I see Adam just joined. Hey, Adam. I just like that this will record, and so hopefully people will benefit later. I got to take this out of large screen, and I'm going to go to my Aleppo Codex here, and I'll show you. This is from 1 Samuel 18. And what does he say here? It says, Vayomer David el Shaul. David said to Saul, Mi anochi, who am I? And see again, just like with the Washington Pentateuch, we have this little circle here, and it says Mi anochi, and the circle points us to the margin. There's a little baby gimel there, and that tells us 3 times. So the Aleppo Codex is in agreement with the Washington Pentateuch that they both say Mi Anochi occurs 3 times. The third example I already pulled up here is from 2 Samuel 7, and I had it here. Aharon ben Asher, he was the scribe who lived in the 900s in Tiberias, Israel. He's the one whose handwriting we're looking at here. So we're reading a Jewish scribe's handwriting that's over 1,000 years old. It's pretty cool. But he has the same note, Mi Anochi, and he uses a gimel with 1 dot, but it still means the same thing 3 times. And if we looked over in this margin over here, we would see where David says to God, who am I? And maybe I went too far. Yeah, I lost it on the page. Here it is. It's the more. I guess I was already there. It says, Vayavo Hamelech David, and King David came, Vayeshev lifnei Adonai, and sat before the Lord, Vayomer, and said, Mi Anochi. And see, there's a little circle here. Now it's in the margin because the first word, the who, which is the word me in Hebrew, is up here. Anochi, Gimel. That means 3 times. Who am I, Adonai Elohim? Who am I, O Lord God? Umi Veiti, and who is my house? Right? And the idea here is that David is humbled before God, and he's going to have this opportunity. Well, he wants to build a temple, but David, in fact, will not ultimately build it, but his son, King Solomon, will. Any event, so that's just the first rabbit trail that's just on the Mi Anochi here, this little guy, that occurs 3 times. Now, let's go to the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we'll see the same piece. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use my written one here so you can see it. So it begins here, Vayomer, and we can't see it, but it says Vayomer Moshe. And Moses said to Elohim, and all we see here is the end of the word, and it's not super high res, but this here is the end of the word Elohim. So there's like an aleph right here. There's a lamed broken. There's a hey. There's a yod, and then there's a mem sofid going down there. So it kind of looks. I gotta make it so that keyboard won't keep popping up. Yeah, maybe I gotta go down here. The word Elohim is going to look kind of like this. And that final mem goes way long. That's the way he makes it. Now, I'm making my block letters a little more, mine are sloppy, and mine are more formed from later style. The hets here and the hays both touch. That little guy touches in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So anyway, here's our word, mi anochi. So if you were studying Hebrew and you turned in something that looked like that to your teacher, they might not be happy with you. But that's mem and then a yod. And look at how big that yod is. That yod is almost as tall as the mem. It's pretty big. That's the word me. And if we put a vowel on it, we'd put a little hirik, meaning who. And then there we go. We have an aleph. The aleph kind of, let me get rid of that box here. The aleph is 3 strokes. It's like that. Now he's obviously a little more sloppy and he's writing quickly. Something like that. That's a noon, is just a little guy like that. And then the kaf looks like that. And then again, we have a yod that kind of looks like a little arrow. See, this here's a yod, and this here's a yod, and this here's a yod. So the yods they made was like a little arrow pointing up. So you see those yods there. Now this scribe lived 2,000 years ago. So this is when Yeshua. Now this guy. It's totally possible that this guy lived at the same time and wrote this text at the same time Yeshua was walking on the planet. That's so amazing to me. It might be older. This actually might be even older. This might be from the 1st century BC. So before Yeshua was even born. In other words, this text we're looking at here could very well have been 100 years old already when Yeshua was born. Isn't that amazing to think of that? So here we go. So this is Exodus right here. Oops, I got my eraser on. This is Exodus 3:11, starting right here. And Moses said to Elohim, but of course we've got this gap. We've got the tear. Who am I? Ki, so this is kaf, ki elech el, that I would go to, and then you can scroll over, to Pharaoh. So here's our word Pharaoh. And notice the pay is really small. It looks kind of like that. That's the pay. The resh looks like that. The ayin like that. And the hey is an interesting looking letter like that. Now in today, if I was to write Pharaoh, I would write a pay like that, a resh, an ayin, and a hey. It would look more like that. But or in cursive Hebrew, modern cursive, the pay is like that, resh, ayin, hey, like that. Pretty crazy, huh? And in in old Hebrew, what would that look like? That would look, the pay would be something like that. The row would be like that. The ayin is a little guy like that. And the hey looks like this. So you can see the script and the writing styles of Hebrew. So this would be like 900 BC. This would be, more like 1000 AD, idealized. I've made it more blocky. And then this would be like, this is like the year 2000 AD in a cursive. So, but it's all Hebrew. And of course, we have the Dead Sea Scrolls here. We can just say, let's just say 100 BC for the one we're looking at. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about that, and you can see a little bit of the scribal bit. Now, because there's so much here to talk about, I'm going to fast forward to another part of the text, but I'm going to shift back to our Washington Pentateuch, and I'm going to go to the next page. So again, everything I'm looking at is available for free online. The Washington Pentateuch is available at the museumofthebible.org. At first, when I learned that they had purchased this from a private collection, I was feeling really jealous because I was like, man, a billionaire has access to this, and he probably doesn't even know how to read it, And then I was so grateful. It gave me such joy that they took the time, once they acquired the manuscript, to give it the care and attention to give such wonderful, you see the little metal pointers they had, pins or whatever, to hold down each page flat, and then with really great lighting to photograph every page. Now, of course, you can see the top. You can see where this, of course, there was some tear and there's missing text. And sadly, that's the case it is. With the Dead Sea Scrolls, obviously, it's even worse. We saw the shape of this manuscript, when we zoom out. I mean, so if this is 2,000 years old, something 1,000 years old, thankfully, was maybe built to last. And it had more, a history of book technology behind it, a good history of quality binding, quality page making, and then the quality of the ink, and also what has happened over the 1,000 years between the Dead Sea Scrolls and, for example, the Tiberian tradition we're looking at here. Over that 1,000 years, the scribal artistry has really really developed in very, very beautiful ways. It's just really wonderful. You see the artistry here that you don't see in the Qumran, in any of the Qumran texts. Well, I should be careful. At some time I'll probably do a video on just comparing different scribal hands from Qumran and different quality manuscripts, and you'll see some that you could tell the guy who did it was highly skilled and took his time and had a real high standard of excellence. And then you'll see stuff like this that seems it's not that it stinks, but that it's like he was writing pretty fast. I think he was probably under the gun and he had pressure. But when you compare that with something like this person had time and patience to do everything right, and it's a beautiful product. Okay, so now we're going to move now to that we've already did Exodus 3:11. Now we're going to move to, oops, I want to go to my screen here. Here we go. We want to go to Exodus 3 verse 12. And 3 verse 12 starts right, well, and it's in this space from now this is from, if you've just joined us, this is from Qumran Cave 4, probably in the 1st century BC. So Exodus 3:12 starts somewhere in this space here. And we can compare, it's from this page up here, it starts right here. Vayomer, and it's just, and he spoke, but this is God speaking. So Elohim, it says Vayomer, Elohim is implied. Vayomer ki ehyeh imach, for I will be with you. And what I love about that is when Moses asks God, Mi anochi, who am I? Moses asking a question about himself. The attention's on himself. Who am I? He's looking at himself, trying to solve a problem. Does God say, Moses, let me tell you who you are? No. God answers, Vayomer ki ehyeh imach. God's answer to Moses' question of who he is, I will be with you. Isn't that cool? It reminds me of Psalm 23, right? He leads me in the path of righteousness for his namesake. It's for his purpose that he's doing this, that he's chosen Moses. And Moses is struggling because there's the gap between Moses' knowledge of himself and his desire to obey God. But what's being asked of him is a lot. And you can see him through this chapter. He's kind of processing, he's kind of pushing back. And because he hasn't had the capacity to actually stand strong in faith, in obedience. It's not that he's being really disobedient, but he's nervous and shaking in his shoes a little bit. After all, there's a burning bush here, right? So now we're going to look at a couple more fun things. But so Vayomer ki ehyeh imach, I will be with you. V'zeh lecha ha'ot ki anochi shelachticha v'hotziacha et ha'am mitzrayim. And then it says ta'avdun et ha'elohim al hahar hazeh. Okay, so this is a long verse, and I'll just translate it here. So Vayomer and God, that is Elohim, said, I will be with you, and this, v'zeh lecha ha'ot, and this will be the ot, the sign, ki anochi shalachticha, that I have sent you, behotziacha et ha'am, when you bring out the people, mimitzrayim, from Egypt. Ta'avdun et ha'elohim al ha'har hazeh. You will worship Elohim on this mountain. Al ha'har hazeh, on this mountain. Well, where's this burning bush? It's at Mount Sinai. Isn't that cool? So Moses now, he's in the geography of where he's going to receive the Torah many chapters from now. But he's to go into Egypt, which he's been thinking about for 40 years in the wilderness, because he fled. He's got to go back, and he's going to bring them back to where he is getting this revelation right now, and they're going to worship God there. This is so cool. Okay, so now just a couple notes on medieval scribal tradition. Look at this word. So this is the word vazeh. So vav, Zion, hey. Vav, Zion, hey. That's vazeh. So zeh, you might have heard like mazeh, like what is that? Or what is this? Zeh. Like we sing on Shabbat. Sometimes we sing from Psalm 118. Zeh hayom asa Adonai, right? This is the day that the Lord has made. Zeh hayom. So zeh is this word Zion, hey. Now you might look and you go, wow, that's just a string of letters. These letters just, it's like one giant word. Well, it's true that they wrote these words so tightly together that sometimes it's hard to differentiate. When you zoom out and you look, you kind of behold the whole page, you see the nice handsome columns, right? And that's going to be consistent throughout, except at the Song of the Sea, for example. If you want, you can go and look through this book online yourself at the museumofthebible.org. The Song of the Sea is a beautifully crafted arrangement of the text that's very different. It stands out very starkly from what we're looking at here with the standard 3 columns. But anyway, so yeah, sometimes these words cram together. Zeh lecha ha'ot. This will be the sign. Now remember this, because this is where we're going to go look at the Dead Sea Scrolls now. And I'm going to go back to my iPad. And we started here. So Vayomer is in here somewhere. Oh, well, it's right here, actually. So we're going to have a Vav here, a Yod. There's going to be an Aleph, and then here's our Mem, and then our Resh. So that's our, and he said. So Ki Ehyeh. This is our Ehyeh right here. So this is our Aleph. Now remember, the Hays in the Qumran are really different, and the Yods are like a big arrow. That's what we would look at today. We would say, oh, that's this word. That's Ehyeh, like this. Or even in Paleo Hebrew, right? It would look like this. What we call old. This is the old Hebrew script. But we don't have that here. We have what we call an Aramaic script, and it still has not developed to what we see. Can I move that down? Yeah, there we go. So here's our Ki Ehyeh from the 10th century, and right below it is our Ki Ehyeh from let's say the 1st century BC. So about 1,000-year journey there between those, and of course the vowel points. And now let's compare the next word. What I'm going to do, I'm going to move this up a little bit, and then I want to bring my touchpad back. So imach is with you. Now here it is right here. Here's our imach. So notice our ayin. In some of these manuscripts, the ayin is the smallest letter. Isn't that crazy? Look at it. It's just this little guy like that. That's our ayin. The mem is pretty close to what we're used to, something like that. And then this kaf sofit, you see it goes way down and kind of crosses over like that. That's so, and here's our key. So this is for I will be with you. So Moses says, Mi anochi. Oops. Oh, lost that. What did I do? There we go. Still getting used to this iPad thing. So Moshe says, Mi anochi, who am I? God answers, Ki ahia imach, I will be with you. Don't worry about yourself. Worry about me. Okay, so here's the interesting thing now. So, well, this is all interesting, right? Is v'zeh lacha. Notice the v'zeh lacha. So the vav is kind of like a yod, right? It's got a little bit and then it goes down. But the Zion is just a straight line. And there's more than one Zion here. This is not a mistake. We can look at the scribe's style, and every time he writes a Zion, it's just this little line. But by the 10th century, the Zion has a little head on the top of it. So it looks kind of like not even a Hebrew word, but it's v'zeh. V'zeh lacha ha'ot. And this is our word ha'ot, the sign. This will be the sign, ha'ot. Notice the tav sofit, or well, not sofit, it's just a tav. It goes down, but it kind of goes like that. Actually, I don't like that last one. It's weird because the pen is sliding on the plastic. It's not like writing on a piece of paper. This is the sign, and then we go down here, that I have sent you. So this is our next bit here. Ki anochi shalachticha. That's what we're looking at right here. Ki anochi shalachticha. Bohotziacha et ha'am me mitzrayim. So me, there's our two mems. Mitz, and we've got mitzrayim in there. It's broken. We don't have it, so I'm kind of like, and my tzadi is really stinky. It's not a good tzadi. It would look something more like that. Okay. Now, here's a really cool one. This next word, ta'avdun. It's this word, ta'avdun. And we're going to find it here. This is the word y'all will worship at. So the phrase is this: ta'avdun et ha'elohim al hahar hazeh. Y'all will worship ha'elohim. So we just translate that capital G, God, or if you're, maybe your Bible will say ha'elohim in it or something. Al hahar hazeh, up on this mountain. Here's another hazeh, right? Hahar, the mountain, hazeh, this one. And if we go back to our Dead Sea Scroll, so we've got right here, ta'avdun et ha'elohim. Notice they both have the ha in front of Elohim. So ta'avdun et ha'elohim, which has ha, the Elohim. Well, the Qumran scroll here has exactly the same text. It could have Elohim without the hey, and it would have the same meaning. Al hahar. So here we go. This is our upon al hahar, upon the mountain, and then we got to scroll all the way over, and there's another one of our Zions. Hazeh, hey, Zion, hey. But again, look at his style. His style is just to, oops, I wanted to erase that. Is just that vertical line. That's his Zion right there. Okay, now, but that's not the main part. The main thing is, let's go back to this word ta'avdun. So it's tav, ayin, bet, dalet, vav, nun sofit. Nun sofit. So notice we're already in what we call the Herodian era. Herodian era, so in the 1st century BC, is when not only was there a big money being pushed by Herod into renovation of the temple, he had all sorts of archaeological, architectural. Now it's archaeological when we look back today. Architectural creations, the Caesarea, right? Caesarea by the sea, the Herodian, Masada, the Temple Mount, right? He built up all these places and he invested a lot of money. And at the same time, he invested in scribal education. He built up scribal literacy. And at this time frame is when these Sophite letters really start to appear. So in the earliest layers of the Dead Sea Scrolls, the oldest scrolls, Hebrew doesn't have the consistent Sophite letters. And if you remember back to Paleo Hebrew, so we're looking at, this word is ta of dun, and it means y'all shall worship, right? Y'all shall worship. And we see that nice Nun Sophite, right? Where is it? Yeah, right here. That's our nice Nun Sophite. Sorry, zooming out again. This is so funny because it's like it looks like I'm drawing all over a sacred text, doesn't it? We don't need that there. But if I go to like the Paleo Hebrew, right, in the ancient Hebrew, it's not going to look like that at all, because we're not going to have a Nun Sophite. We're just going to have that word right there. There's no final forms. So it doesn't matter if the Nun is at the beginning of a word or at the end. There's no Sophite letters in ancient Hebrew. So for Moshe writing the Torah, there's no Sophite letters. So when we look at the Masoretic text here, Ta'avdun, with this Nun, Sophite, it's not super long, but it's longer than the Vav. Or we see it, Nun Sophite, 1,000 years prior. Here's our word. Ta'avdun, with nice Nun Sophite. Real quick, while we're talking about Sophite letters, you don't even need to know much Hebrew, and you can skim this page for Mem Sophites. Like here's Mim Mitzrayim right here. Men, Mim, Mem, Tzadi, Resh, right? Yod, and then a giant Mem Sophite. And you can just look. Here's another one. Ha Elohim. Here's another one. Elechem, to Ya'al. Elechem, to them. Ha Elohim. Here's another one. So your eye can get used to seeing this. And notice he makes his Mem Sophites. This is another way we can differentiate scribes, because we can see how this guy makes his mems. It's kind of like I attempted here. He makes a thing that looks like that, and then it looks like he has like a downstroke like that. So it's like this, and then a downstroke. And there's other and it's almost like he always has this extra little hook on there. It seems to always be there. It's like that. That's his Mem Sophite. But there are other manuscripts where that's more careful, and it's a different scribe, because he's consistently making his mems differently. So anyway, that's just one way that we can differentiate scribes. But back to this word ta'avdun, we go to our Washington Pentateuch, and remember how we had the circule earlier with Mi Anochi, who am I? Well, look at this little circule above Ta'avdun, and we look over and there's a lamed with a dot. And whenever you see a lamed with a little dot above it, that means only here in the Masorah. So this only occurs in all the Tanakh. Well, it could be in Torah. If it meant only in the Torah, it would say Bet Torah. But here it's just the lamed. It means in all of Tanakh. In all of Tanakh, this word ta'avdun only occurs once, and this is where it is. Because it's a strange spelling. This nun at the end is not really required. You could say ta'avdu, and it would have the same meaning. It would mean, and you all shall worship. The nun has, and there's different ways scholars call it, but how they describe this nun as a nun paragogicum. but basically, it's ta'avdun, ta'avdu. So if we just had ta'avdu, that would also mean y'all shall worship. So my point is the Nun Sofit does not. Oh, I forgot to flip back. Here I'm writing on my. I was writing on my pad. See, I'm not good at producing this stuff here. So here, what I was doing, I was writing ta'avdu without the Nun, and that just means y'all shall worship. It's from the root ayin bet dalet avad, to do or to work or to worship. Ta'avdu would have mean y'all shall worship, but here we have this Nun Sofit, or sorry, well, it's a Nun Sofit. We call it a pedagogic Nun, and it doesn't really change the translation. But the reason I wanted to point this out is because the Masoretes, when they make a note like this and they say it only occurs here once, why do they do that? They're doing that because they know that there could be a scribe who's kind of a free thinking guy who's writing. He's like, the manuscript I'm copying from has this Nun, and the word probably only needs to be ta'avdu, right? And I could just, change, and I'll just keep writing my Torah, and I just will leave that Nun out because I think it wasn't supposed to be there. The Masoretes are saying stop. They put the little circle above it, and then they put the lamed, and they say, nope, this is the way it is, and it's only here. Yes, you're right to notice that it's strange, but don't change it. That's above you. It's above your pay grade. Well, it's above any scribe's pay grade, right, to change the text, right? Because they're preserving. So what's neat is that we can look at the Dead Sea Scrolls and we see that Nun is there. So this is the only place in all the Dead Sea Scrolls where we have this word ta'avdun, and it's pretty cool. So that shows a continuity of scribal knowledge, doesn't it? Of something just as strange as a spelling. Now, remember, when we did Parashat Vayechi last week, we were looking at a manuscript produced by a different scribe from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he missed words, he skipped a phrase, he had a different style of handwriting. But yet this text that we're looking at here, while the letters are formed differently, we do see that it coheres very tightly with the Exodus that we have from the Masoretic tradition for 1,000 years later. Pretty cool, huh? That takes us, basically to let's see here, because me and rabbit trails. I wanted to go to one more place here, and it's all good text. We could talk about every word all day long. I love this. I don't have any necessarily textual comments to say, but this is, he says, Vayomer Moshe. So that means Moses, Moses said to Elohim. So Vayomer Moshe El Elohim. Behold, I'm going to the children of Israel, and I say to them, Elohe Avotechem, the God of your fathers, sent me to you. Vayomruli, and they say, V'amruli, and they say to me, Mashamo, what's his name? So Moses is anticipating a problem. He's thinking about the conversation that he might have, and he's like, okay, I'm going to go to him and I'm going to say, the God of your father. So that's where we're here. Elohe Avotechem, and it's kind of sadly torn here. Sent me to you, right? That's what this is. Sent me to you. Oops, sorry. Ve'amru. Now this looks like a yod, but it's vav, aleph, mem, resh, like that. Ve'amru. And they will say to me, and you can't see it here, but it's li, and we know, there's times where we know that it's what it's got to be, even when we can't see all the letters clearly, just because we know the text from other manuscripts. Ma shemo. So that's it right there. That's our ma. What? Shemo. Anybody know it? Shem is the word name. Shemo is his name. What's his name? So you could almost put a question here. They're going to ask, Ma Shemo. Oh yeah? You think he appeared to you and sent you? What's his name? And then Moses asks Elohim, Ma Omar Alehem. What will I say to them? And this is pretty cool stuff. This is from Exodus 3:13. And one of the things I want to look at here is this word. So Ma Shemo, what's his name? Ma Omar Alehem. What will I say to them? Well, for those who've studied a little bit of Hebrew, when you see this word, Amar, Aleph, Mem, Resh, the normal vocalization is kamatz patach, like that. And Amar just means he said. Oops. He said. But here we have the same letters, Aleph, Mem, Resh, but look at how it's vocalized in the Tiberian tradition. It's got a cholam and then a patach, Omar, which means I will say. Because if you've done Hebrew, what you realize is that even though they look exactly the same, Aleph, Mem, Resh, and that the root is Aleph, Mem, Resh, in example 1, Aleph, Mem, Resh is the root. Aleph, Mem, Resh, he said, Amar. And that's an ugly Resh. Probably all my writing is kind of ugly here because I'm not used to it, but that's all right. Amar. I don't want it to go so far. Golly, I can't make a Resh. Omar, our second version. The Aleph that we see is not the same Aleph that we see here. This Aleph, in number 2, it's the Aleph that marks the first person singular in what we call the imperfect, the I will, the future form. And the Aleph of the root disappears. So the only part of the root that's left is the mem and the resh. The Aleph in front of it and the O vowel say I will say. But why is that important? Well, the Masorah, Aleph, Mem, Resh, without any vowels on it, the reader wouldn't know. Now, in other words, I could read this same passage and I could revocalize it. I'd have the Dead Sea Scrolls. It would say ma, and then this word. It's Alehem, like that, yeah. I could vocalize it that way. But it wouldn't make sense. What he said to them. What he said to them. But if I change the vowels to ma omar, like that, then it's what I will say to them. It's because it's a question, because it's a ma. We would say, what will I say to them? So the Dead Sea Scrolls doesn't have any vowel points. Here's our word. Aleph, Mem, Re, Ma. This shows that they knew Hebrew. They knew when they saw those 3 letters, they knew that they could either say Omar or they could say Amar. Now to us, it's like, well, what's the difference between those two? Well, it's a big difference. Amar means he said. Omar means I will say, or what will I say. But they didn't need um, the vowel points. Not only that, because this aleph here is not part of the aleph of the root. In the same way that we go back and we saw when he says up here, mi anochi ki elech el paro. So then, who am I that I will go to Pharaoh? So that aleph there. Oh, I realize I can use my other deal here. This aleph right here is not part of the root. That's our marker for the first person. In the same way that the aleph of ehyeh right there is the marker of the first person singular. And we have another one, otzi, right here. Aleph, tzadi, yod, aleph. That aleph there is also not part of the root. It's the first person singular. It means I. This is why, another reason why the Hebrew word pictures are nonsense. Because you could have the same aleph could be present, but it's there for a completely different reason. It's based on the living language of people talking with each other, having conversations. When we have to remember that language and script are different. Language comes first. People were speaking to each other, not writing notes to each other. Like when we speak to each other, we don't see A's and B's and C's and Z's floating around in space. We hear the sound of the whole word and we have comprehension based on the syntax of our language and our shared dialect. And we know that those boundaries get stretched. If I go to Boston, for example, and I'm from the West Coast and I go to the East Coast, there can be real thick accents where it's still English. It's the same language and I can still pick it up, but I have to learn to hear it differently. I have to learn to listen differently because accents and sounds and inflections are very, very different. It's because language is different than text. Language is different than the letters. And there's information in the language. Only later did the script be developed to capture oral speech. So if anybody's trying to sell you on this Hebrew word picture, nonsense. It's total nonsense. It's total nonsense. Any well, like we know the aleph, right? Originally, it's an ox head, right? But that doesn't mean. But that's just to help them say the word ah, right? That's all it is. That would be like if that was a mountain, and I used the word ma. Well, actually, like water, mayim or something, right? Ma. It's to create to capture a phoneme so that we can share, so we can recreate oral speech from written text. But yeah, so the whole Hebrew word picture thing's nonsense. Don't buy it. But anyway, I think that's really cool. Back to the Ta'avdun and the Amar versus Omar. These are places where the scribal tradition has continuity over that 1,000-year time period, and there's no changes. Now, I haven't gone through letter by letter, word by word over all the manuscripts of Qumran. I know that there's scholars that spend their life studying this kind of stuff, and it's an amazing time for us to be alive. We have technology where I could sit down and record something like this and share it with you, and it can be saved on the internet. Someone can watch it later. We have these manuscripts that are free and available. This is the deadseascrolls.org.il, that IL up there, that's for Israel, IL. I think they have every fragment of the Dead Sea Scrolls with a high-res image. Isn't that cool? Now, it's not translated for you, right? There's work you got to do. You have to have a certain skill set before you're going to be able to get anything out of it. But what else do you want to do? If you can evaluate the different kinds of goals in life, and I think there's some value, and you can take your time. You can learn a little bit and think, Lord willing, you're given many years, and we have peace and prosperity, that you can use some of your leisure time to develop skill sets such as learning the Hebrew alphabet and studying maybe different ways scribes wrote uh, words and letters and how they made their letters differently, etc. And you don't even have to start learning Hebrew grammar yet. You can start learning vocabulary. Like, for example, I mean, how many of you can just look at this and see, oh, that's B'nai Israel right there. B'nai, there's our bet. There's a noon and a yod. B'nai, yod, sheen, or it's a scene, resh, aleph, lamed. Let me trade back to my messy keyboard here. Oh, oops, it fell asleep on me. So see that B'nai Israel right here? And then you could, if you've got an artistic bent, you can try to even maybe copy that. And maybe you can get a piece of paper. Let's see, I want black ink. And let's just see, see if I can kind of mimic that guy's hand. It's going to take some practice. It's a little bigger than that, B'nai. And then the Zlamids are wonderful, aren't they? I think they started way big and then they come in like that. Sons of Israel, right? And you can look around and you can say, oh, look at that. What's that? That's Moshe. There's our mem, shin, and the hey, the weird hey from Qumran. Elohim right here. Aleph, Lamed, hey, yod, and then this guy's got those crazy mems. So you can learn to notice things. You can compare scripture with scripture like we did. You can compare manuscript with manuscript and say, oh, there's extra phrases in this passage. Like last week, we saw where a scribe skipped a whole phrase, and he was probably in a hurry. So there's so much to learn here. And we've just talked about like a few points from just a few verses, but the whole Torah portion, all the scriptures are wonderful for study. But, sadly, we don't have the entire Bible from Qumran. There's just so much of it that's fragmentary. Whereas when we get to the Middle Ages, we start to have our oldest complete Tanakhs. And they're self-referential. They're full of all these vowel points and all these wonderful little notes that the scribes made to help them preserve. It's kind of like a quality control. But they also had their artistic rationale. It wasn't just dry statistics. There's an artistic element here, and you can see in this kind of fancy design of a Masorah note up at the top on this page, they had a devotional aspect to their labors. This was, after all, they believed this is God's word. These were the letters that they were sitting and writing were the letters that Moshe first sat down and wrote. That's their consciousness. So in a way, they are tracing Moshe's marks after them. Now, what we don't know if these medieval scribes, if they were aware of Paleo-Hebrew. We don't know. We don't, for example, like this word here, like would they be aware? Did I do any other? Or we don't know that the medieval scribes were exposed to that because they lived under Islamic rule. They had limited access, But if they'd seen ancient, if they had been digging around somewhere in a field and they found an old, ancient what would be an archaeological site, and they found a little cylinder seal or something like that, or a little stamp from ancient Israel, they would probably see this kind of stuff. Or if they had seen coins from the Hasmoneans or the Bar Kokhba revolt, they would see Paleo-Hebrew writing. But as far as we know, the Masoretic scribes of Tiberias, they never use Paleo-Hebrew letters. So we don't know if they even knew they existed. But what they sure did is create beautiful Hebrew calligraphy. And we have to remember this was under Islamic rule, so they were not free in their own land. The Muslims governed Tiberias, and they had governed Jerusalem. They were governing Jerusalem. They'd already built the Dome of the Rock, or the first stage of the Dome of the Rock existed in this time period. So Jews in the land were doing their best to have a worshipful attitude and a hopeful attitude that God would come and fix the situation. But what did they develop? They developed beautiful art. And part of the context is Islamic art, Islamic and Christian book art. And the Christians had books centuries before the Jewish scribes. And then the Muslims adopted the book form. And the Jews were actually the last of the three to adopt the book. When I say the book, I'm talking about the codex, where it's no longer a scroll, but it's pages on a spine. And so the Jews, these Jewish scribes from Tiberias, they took this very seriously, and they developed Hebrew script to be so beautiful. And we have to understand that the beauty of that art, even though you might look at that and you go, oh, that's not really artistic, I see it as very artistic. Because what do we compare it to? Well, compare it to the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? I mean, look at this. There's not much art element in this. This is just like homework, right? You know what I mean? It's like a homework assignment kind of thing. But you get to this, and you have a person who's devoting their life in a very religious, sincere, and probably a little lived kind of like an ascetic. You know, they probably because it's a very specialized skill set that they have to be able to read and write, and that they understand all these little vowel points. And you have to remember, all the Masoretic notes are in Aramaic. So you've got two languages represented on one of these texts. You've got the Hebrew main text, you've got the language of the little dots, meaning what those symbols mean, and then you have the Aramaic language of the Masorah notes. So it's a very highly educated person that is matched or coupled with high creative artistic bent, brought together in a devotional religious context to produce, and to, that they had to have someone was supporting these scribes. Maybe they were kind of poor, they probably weren't super well off, but they had what they needed to live a life long enough to develop the skill set, to gain the knowledge, and then to be able to practice the scribal art and produce such beautiful volumes. So anyway, hey, I appreciate everybody joining, and this video I think will stay up. I'm having fun doing these. I'm trying to learn how to do this because I feel like I have so much I'd like to share, but I'm trying to learn how best to do it. So if you just send me a note, if you like this, or tell me what you like, tell me what you don't like, it would help me shape my skill set, just like these scribes had to shape their skill set. I'm wanting to sharpen a skill set that would be a blessing to people, to help them step into the world of the ancient manuscripts, beyond the print culture. So it's kind of like a time travel before there was a printing press in the world, and when access to the Word of God was very, very different than it is today, when we have multiple Bibles printed on our shelves. We're going back into the world of scribes and quiet devotional attention to the Word of God in great detail, that it's a significant part of people's lives rather than just a marginal aspect. But I'd be grateful to hear any feedback, and hope you all have a wonderful Shabbat.